In 401 BC, a Persian soldier named Mithridates was sewn between two boats, smeared with honey, and left beneath the blazing sun for 17 full days while insects devoured him alive. 17 days. That single recorded case is the only reason we even know the punishment existed, yet it still ranks only number 11 on our list. If that horror can be merely 11th, what kind of nightmares wait higher up? Tonight, for the next 20 entries, we descend together into the absolute abyss of human cruelty methods so inventive, so prolonged, and so perfectly calculated to break both body and soul that they still haunt historians 2,000 years later. This is the countdown you will never unsee. We begin at number 20 with Rome's Pona Cullae, the penalty for killing your own parent. In 118 AD, Emperor Hadrian finally allowed judges to replace it with being thrown to the beasts, because even hardened Roman magistrates could no longer stomach what came next. The condemned parricide was flogged until the skin hung in ribbons, a wolfskin bag pulled over the head to blind him, wooden clogs nailed to his feet, so every step was agony, then sewn alive into a leather sack, with a live dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. Black oxen dragged a writhing bundle to the sea or river and hurled it in. The animals panicked, clawed, bit, and stung in the darkness while the prisoner drowned in absolute terror. Suetonius wrote that only those who confessed ever suffered it, because no one acquitted of parricide would ever be monstrous enough to deserve it. Number 19 takes us to medieval England, drawing and quartering, the traitor's death that lasted on the statute books until 1867. William Wallace met it in 1305. The condemned was dragged through London streets behind a horse, half-hanged until consciousness flickered, then cut down alive. The executioner sliced open the abdomen, pulled out the intestines while the victim still watched, burned them in front of his face, beheaded him, then hacked the body into 4 quarters. Each piece was parboiled and displayed on spikes in different cities as a warning that treason would tear both man and kingdom apart. At number 18, we reach Imperial China's lanky death by 1,000 cuts. Practiced from the Liao dynasty in 907 AD until its final abolition in 1905, the executioner was paid extra if he could keep the victim alive through hundreds of precise slices. Flesh was removed in thin strips from breasts, arms, thighs never deep enough to kill quickly. Photographs survive of the last man to suffer it, taken in 1904. His eyes are still open, still aware, as the blades continue their work. 17th is deceptively simple, cropping of ears. In 17th century England, Puritan writers like William Preen had their ears sliced off and the stumps nailed to the pillory for hours. Many died slowly of infection, screaming while the crowd jeered. The mutilation was permanent. Every mirror for the rest of their lives reminded them what the state thought of their words. Number 16. Boiling alive. Henry VIII made it law in 1531 for poisoners. In 1542, Margaret Davy was lowered into a cauldron at Smithfield and cooked for 2 full hours before death. The crowd could smell human flesh burning over the London streets. 15th. Sawing in half. The Romans suspended victims upside down so the blood rushed to the head and kept them conscious, then slowly sawed from crotch to sternum. The Book of Maccabees records the prophet Isaiah meeting this end in 700 BC. 14th. Execution by elephant in South and Southeast Asia. In 1670, the king of Kandy crushed rebellious monks beneath an elephant's foot, trained to prolong the agony by pressing down and releasing, until the skull finally burst. We are only at number 13 and already the darkness feels suffocating. Hours of research have gone into this script research that left me unable to sleep. If these stories are gripping you the way they gripped me, please subscribe and ring the bell. The worst is still ahead, and I don't want you to face it alone. Number 13 is the Brazen Bull, invented in 556 BC by Parallels of Athens for the tyrant Phalaris of Agrigenum. The victim was locked inside a hollow bronze bull. Fire was lit beneath. As the metal grew white-hot, the screams were channeled through acoustic tubes in the bull's nostrils, turning agony into what onlookers heard as the bellowing of an enraged animal. Phalaris tested it on the inventor himself. Number 12. The fate of unchaste Vestal virgins. Because their blood could not be shed, Rome buried them alive in an underground chamber with a single loaf of bread and a lamp. The lamp always went out first. 11. We already met Mithridates and the boats of Scaphism, eaten alive for 17 days in 401 BC. 10th. Crucifixion. In 71 BC, after Spartacus's revolt, 6,000 rebels were nailed along the Appian Way from Rome to Capua, 200 crosses per mile for 400 miles. The road stank of death for years. 9th. Rat torture. In 1560, Dutch rebel leader Dietrich Sonoy strapped cages of starving rats to prisoners' stomachs and heated the cages. The rats burrowed straight through living flesh to escape the heat. 8th. The rack. Every major European dungeon had one. Victims were stretched until shoulders, elbows, hips, and knees dislocated in sequence. Some grew 6 inches longer before their spines snapped. 7th. Keel hauling. Dutch and English sailors were dragged under barnacle-encrusted hulls until flesh hung in strips or lungs filled with seawater. Survival was rare, infection was certain. 6th. The breaking wheel. The executioner threaded the victim's limbs through the spokes and smashed every major bone with an iron bar slowly, methodically, then hoisted the still-living rag-doll figure onto a pole for the crows. 5th. Flaying alive. Assyrian king Ashurbanipal in 668 BC kept detailed reliefs showing prisoners skinned from neck to ankle while still breathing. The skins were nailed to city walls as warnings. 4th. The Judas cradle. Victims were lowered onto a sharp wooden pyramid that entered the anus or vagina. They were left rocking in agony for days, infection and blood loss finishing what gravity began. 3rd. The pear of anguish. Inserted into mouth, rectum, or vagina, the device was slowly cranked open until jaws shattered or internal organs ruptured. 2nd. Impalement. In 1462, Vlad Dracula left 20,000 Ottoman prisoners impaled on stakes outside Targovist. Mem 2, the conqueror of Constantinople, saw the forest of dying men and turned his army around in horror. And the single most horrific torture ever recorded. Number 1 is the blood eagle, Viking execution reserved for the most hated enemies. The ribs were sawn from the spine on both sides, cracked open like wings, and the still-beating lungs pulled out onto the victim's shoulders while he yet lived. The earliest possible reference appears in the 9th century Orkneyinga saga. Whether every detail, literal or poetic exaggeration, the terror it inspired was real enough to empty entire coastlines when longships appeared. We have reached the end of the descent. 20 methods, 20 windows into the absolute deepest pit of human cruelty. These things were not done by monsters wearing human skin, they were done by men and women exactly like us, given power and permission. That is the most terrifying truth of all. Which one of these 20 will you carry with you into the dark tonight? Which one made you realize how thin the line really is between civilization and the abyss? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you made it this far, thank you for facing the darkness with me.